As we know, this is a Transgender Day of Visibility, and in the work that our congregation has been doing, particularly with our Gender Diversity Task Force. Leonard's here, our chair of our Gender Diversity Task Force. We've been continuing to deepen our engagement and learning on issues, transgender issues, gender expression, gender identity issues, both in policy and practice and education within our congregation. And so I'm really honored that Michaela Mendelsohn's going to speak with us this afternoon, this evening. I want to begin though and share a reading by Dr. Joy Ladin. Professor Ladin is a faculty member at Yeshiva University. She is a transgender person herself and has written a lot about the experience of being transgender and Jewish. And she wrote this piece called In the Image of God that is in my book, Mishkan Ge'ava, and it's specifically connected to transgender. Thanks, Max is holding up the copy. Transgender Day of Visibility. The Torah doesn't tell us what being created in the image of God means, or explains how human beings are similar to the invisible, disembodied, time and space transcending creator of the universe. That to me, she says, is the point of reading God and the Torah from a transgender perspective, to better understand the kinship between humanity and the inhuman, bodiless God in whose image we are created, a God who does not fit any of the categories through which we define ourselves and one another. From the time I first read Genesis as a child who knew that I didn't fit the male/female binary, it has been clear to me that the image of God has nothing to do with sex, gender, human differences, or human bodies. If our goal is to recognize our kinship with God, we need to look to the aspects of humanity that can't be conceived in terms of gender, to the ways in which we, like the God in whose image we are created, exceeded or confound human categories. We don't have to identify as transgender to engage in this effort, but being transgender forces me and many transgender people to recognize the ways in which we don't fit human categories, because the aspects of ourselves that don't make sense in terms of binary gender are at the heart of our sense of who we are. Like God, we are used to being present and either invisible or seen as incomprehensible and sometimes terrifying. We are accustomed to living in the wilderness, beyond the bounds of binary and the world that is based upon them. It can be lonely there and hard, but according to the Torah, we will see in the next chapter, it is often in that wilderness where human beings comes closest to God. So as Dr. Ladin writes, it's so important for us, specifically on this day, is to assert that trans rights are human rights and that we are all created in the image of God. And so that's why I'm just so excited for all of you to meet Michaela Ivry Mendelsohn. Welcome, Michaela. We're so happy that you're here. She is a transgender activist and public speaker, a businesswoman with over 40 years of entrepreneurial leadership experience. She's currently the CEO of Pollo West Corporation, a franchise group for El Pollo Loco restaurants. Michaela was chosen as in 2018 Nation's Face of Diversity for the restaurant industry and led the 2018 LA Pride Parade as its Grand Marshal. As part of her career with El Pollo Loco, Michaela spent 9 years as the president of their National Franchise Association. Michaela founded the organization Trans Can Work, whose mission is building a culture nationwide for transgender people to thrive in the workplace. Michaela speaks across the nation on LGBTQ issues to create awareness and foster change. She serves on the board of the Trevor Project, whose mission is to eradicate suicide in LGBTQ youth, as well as the Founders Council of the Williams Institute, an LGBTQ research program at UCLA Law School. Michaela was appointed by Mayor Eric Garcetti to serve on his LA Workforce Development Board. And Michaela's work's been highlighted in the National Geographic documentary Gender Revolution, hosted by Katie Couric, and she was the feature of August LA Stories on Spectrum. She's been honored by Adweek in their inaugural Pride All-Stars campaign. 14 individuals were chosen from around the country to celebrate Adweek's commitment to the LGBTQ community. She's the proud parent of 3 grown children and now lives with her partner, Carbell, their 5-year-old son, Isidore, and their recent addition, baby Livia. And we are just so excited to have you be part of our learning and our growing and to make a connection with you, Michaela. Happy Passover and welcome to Kol Ami, and we're so glad you're here.
Happy Passover, everybody. Thank you very much, Rabbi. I realized at the end there that this is a couple years old, the bio. So our son Isidore is now 7 years old, and and Livia is nearly 2 years old. And both were, we lead, LGBT families are often kind of complicated because we choose, and one of the reasons, and trans families are even more complicated. Don't get me started on that. But we choose as LGBT families, more times than not, we're choosing to have children in a way that's different and more purposeful than other, let's say, heterosexual families, because we go through this series of adoption or sperm donors or such and such, and for many years it just reminds me, of having a family, how grateful I feel, because in so many parts of the country for so long, that was just, we couldn't do that. And I just feel so fortunate to have these 2 wonderful children. We belong to Temple Kol Tikva in Woodland Hills. We lived for 5 years in West Hollywood, my partner Carmel and I. And after our son was born, we moved out here because we could afford to get a bigger property for the kids. Property values in West Hollywood are through the roof. But West Hollywood is a wonderful place, and we have many friends there, and we come back often. So I really appreciate the Temple's commitment to the subject of transgender society and honoring, that as a civil rights issue. It's certain, it is the fastest growing segment. Not we call it TGI now. Acronyms change so quickly. I feel I need to explain that it's transgender, gender non-conforming, and intersex. So the current acronym that seems to be accepted is TGI, and the TGI community, especially the non-binary or gender non-conforming community, is by far the fastest growing part of the LGBT segment. But it's also the part that needs our help the most, because they're 20 years or so behind where the gay and lesbian community is in terms of their rights. We just finished going through a time with the administration that is no longer in place, that they were stripping our transgender rights on a very fast pace, and we all fought back, but there wasn't a whole lot that could be done when it's done by executive order. And those are being very quickly, the current administration have put those back in place. In fact, President Biden proclaimed today the first National Transgender Day of Visibility. So I'm really pleased with the opportunities we have now to really make great strides. But we're starting at a place, a deep hole of need. And I'm reminded that this is Passover, and how at Passover, I hope Rabbi, you'll correct me later about my not getting this right, but we open the door, we have this extra cup for Elijah, and now we have a cup for Miriam. And it somewhat symbolizes allowing the stranger in your home. And it was wonderful. We had 2 friends over this year that we were comfortable having in the home, because we've all been vaccinated except the kids. And it had the virtual Seder with the temple, which was wonderful. But it the whole idea of how we treat the stranger reminds me of, I forgot who quote this was. It'll come to me eventually, but it was that, we judge a society by how it takes care of its most vulnerable. And right now, the trans being on the board of the Trevor Project, being on the Founders Council of Williams, I see all the studies, I see all the research, I see, that that in all of these studies on LGBT, when we separate out the TGI part of it, it's like twice or three times as high in the numbers of in society, in the workplace, in school, with harassment, violence, school bullying, shaming. Those things are really, those levels are really high. We're talking about, well over 50% have experienced all of these things on average in the transgender community. And so we have an opportunity to make that better. And I think as an LGBT based temple to some degree, I guess you are, it's a wonderful thing that, we can focus on people that need us. I want to mention that I came out in my temple about 4 years ago. Just a quick story. It was really interesting. It might be interesting to you, but for me, it was really a moment in my life I'll never forget. For the first at Temple at Kol Tikva for the first year and a half, I was going there. I wouldn't like disclose I'm transgender, and I always wondered, does this person know? Does that person know? I'm talking to a person, I get friendly with someone, and I felt like the need to just come out and get it out on the table. So I went to the rabbi, and wonderful Rabbi John, who revealed to me, we were sitting in his office, he said, well, he says, I've been trying to put together a rainbow Shabbat. And you can help me if you want to speak at it, that will make that our first rainbow Shabbat, and you can help me put that together. So we got, he went to a temple in, I think it was in San Francisco, to get some things. And as part of the service that was used, we put together our own little special prayers to go with the regular ones. And I got to speak to and reveal myself, and take on my legal Jewish name, Michaela Ivry Mendelsohn, which was already my legal name. I had changed it, but it was the first time, I was given that name in the temple. And that was really meaningful for me. And the night before we'd done a mikvah up there off Mulholland, the mikvah they have there in the University of Judaism. And the Rabbi Cantor had done some special prayers for it. It was such a special experience, I can't tell you. And we had the trans chorus of LA was there too. And they sang some songs. And it was really incredible because it was funny how we invited a lot of people from the LGBT community, and the people from the LGBT community tended to sit on one side, and the congregants tended to sit on the other side. And it wasn't, I think it was just the LGBT people were just all kind of knew each other, so they wound up sitting together. It wasn't that they were told to sit on one side or another. But the love in that room was so palpable that people 4 years later still come up to me and say, I've never felt so much love in our temple than we felt that night. Because after the service, everyone got together and hugged and kissed. It was just, I'm getting chills right now thinking about it, the beauty of that moment. And, Woodland Hills isn't, we're not an LGBT, kind of focused area. And, I think the rabbi was trying to bring people in from other areas, to focus on this. And it was really, really wonderful. So let me get back to the civil rights issue and what we chose. Look, I like to do it all, and I'm on all these boards, but I chose to really focus on one thing, and that was employment. And the reason that happened was because about 9 years ago in one of my restaurants, we hired this transgender woman named Christy, who my director of operations came to me and said, this is the first one person besides yourself that works for us that we know is transgender that's come out to us. And she has a story that I think you should hear. So I sat down with Christy, which I thought it'd be like 10 minutes on her break, but we wound up sitting for an hour. And her story and the way she'd been treated in the workplace, and I think it's on our website, transcowork.org. Her story on YouTube, actually, it was YouTube or Facebook. It got 9 million hits in like 1 month, because it was so heart rendering. What had happened to her and her emotions about it. And I realized at that moment how fortunate I was to have transitioned as the boss of my own workplace, and how much I needed to give to others to help them through those situations. So I started hiring was the first thing, and I hired about 50 transgender employees in my then 13 restaurants over a period of 3 to 4 years, and it was an amazing experience for the coworkers. It was great. They had each other's backs. For the customers, it was wonderful because they felt like I had customers all the time coming to me saying how special this was for them, that it was opening their hearts and minds, having these relationships with the transgender employees. And for the employees who came to us, because this is kind of a startup job for most, for the first time in their lives, getting a chance to work on a level footing in the workplace and as their true gender identity. They came to us with most of them with very low self-esteem, and some coming from having to resort to things to make money that they regretted and put them in danger. And to see the changes in them almost on a day-to-day basis, when the customers were mirroring back to them who they really were and accepting them for who they really were, to see their lives change. And we saw dramatic change in people's lives, people going back to school, bettering themselves, moving on to better jobs elsewhere. A few got married. I mean, it was just amazing. And I hope that nearly every one of them left with just a better sense of themselves and where they came to us. But I decided this is something that was really important, that we learned so much from it that we should do something with it. And so we started Transco Work about 5 years ago. I joined about the same time I joined the Mayor's Workforce Development Board. I was invited to, but I agreed because I wanted to learn, how to help people get work. And so we started this program. It started mostly with me going around the country and speaking to a lot of corporations and trying to help them understand that they were doing the right thing, but it was also going to be good for business and why. And also with such a fast growing population of people entering this segment of non-binary, that, it was going to be so important to their futures and their workforce. And then I started to bring on people to work for Transco Work that could train and go into these companies, and open inclusive spaces, to help change culture. And from there, it went into, okay, now we're opening those spaces and we want to help them find people. So then we started the very difficult work of workforce development, and started welcoming in hundreds, now thousands of transgender individuals who wanted help finding a job or getting training for the right kind of job that they wanted. And we're currently, and we have been for a couple of years now, the largest and most successful model of that kind in the country. So we feel we have this model that we really want to scale. We've gotten it prepared to a point where we feel we could really scale it. We're putting together the funding to now move it down to San Diego. We're and so that'll be one area at a time in the state. But then we want to move it across the country. So we partnered with HRC in that they can help us with some of the logistics, but it's mostly the work of Transco work, on put on a series of national job fairs. And the first one starts on June 1st in Dallas as a perfect way to kick off Pride Month. And we put on 3 job fairs here in LA that were in person before COVID hit, extremely successful. We got a lot of people hired. Corporations loved it. And this will be the first virtual one we're doing. We were involved in a virtual one that we helped Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms do in Atlanta, extremely successful. Had over 80 employers and over 800 job seekers. And there were over about 1,000 positions that they were hiring for the companies. So we're doing this in Dallas on June 1st, and we're going to then move it from city to city to different areas of the country. We'll go to like the South, for instance, further south, and maybe to some of the less focused areas, and we might group 2 or 3 states together and do a Southern region job fair. And we'll go to New York and maybe Cleveland and Philadelphia and DC and etc., Kansas City, who knows. And the idea is we don't want to, this is like a garden that we're planting, right? We don't want to just go in to a community, get people a few jobs and leave. So we're taking a large part of the funds, up to 50% of the funds that come in through sponsorship from each job fair, from the corporate sponsors and booth holders. It's going to go back to creating a local workforce development program in each of these areas to learn what we've learned here in LA, and to move this program all across the country. Currently, the unemployment rate for the trans community is 3 times as high as the national average. And it's not because of a lack of talent, it's because of culture and people afraid to hire because they don't understand. And when we go into a corporation, and we do our training, now it's virtual, which has actually helped us move it quicker. We create this feeling. I'd love for all of you to get a chance to come to one of our trainings. When we do them here in LA, I'll make sure the rabbi sends an invitation out. And we put you in a situation where you truly experience what the trans person on the job experiences. We actually partnered with Second City Improv to create these skits, right? And so people, you're like feeling like you're this young Black non-binary person that's going in and gets treated in all the wrong ways. And then you get into groups, smaller groups on the Zoom, and talk about how that could have been avoided. And then we have it filmed the right way. But when you watch the wrong way, you squirm. It's pretty, you know, because you're feeling what they're feeling and how shameful that feels. So it's creating that culture where people feel comfortable hiring from our community, that they understand it, and then it's connecting them with the right people for the right jobs. So this is a program that's when I was saying it's 3 times high unemployment, people of color, trans people of color, are 7 times more likely to be living in poverty than the rest of the population, under 10,000 a year. So this is it's an issue that needs our help. It's a civil rights issue. I am going to ask you to do what you can in your own workplaces to be an ally. We'd, of course, also love it if you could support the work we do at transcowork.org. I'm Michaela at transcowork.org to help us spread this across the country. We do need support. You know, Rabbi and I talked about a year ago about, and I said, Rabbi, how do you ask for money? I mean, I know you wouldn't be able to run a temple if you don't ask for money. And I said, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm used to making money. I don't feel I should ask anybody. The only person I've ever asked for money is the bank, you know? And so it's like, okay, so and I'm still not good at it, but I'm just going to put that out there if anybody wants to support our work. Another way to support our work is to recommend us to the companies that you either own or work for or work with, that we can help them diversify. We can help them create the right culture. We can help them bring in the right people and fill jobs. Um, I've done panels for some of the largest companies in the world, and they often say in these panels that the people in charge of the hiring, and that is that they've realized that if they don't have diversity, LGBT diversity in their companies, they don't have the kind of thinking that's going to be able to take care of their customers, the broader stream, the spectrum of all their customers, and that they're going to lose business and they're going to become antiquated. So, it's good for the businesses. We do charge for those services, and that helps us because we don't charge anybody to get them employees. So that helps pay for that. So that's another way you can support us. Um, uh, I should have something poignant to end on. I didn't think about it, about how I should end this, other than to say, good Pesach. I hope you're all enjoying your family celebrations. I'm sorry that some of them are virtual, but as we said at the end of our Seder with our virtual temple the other night, next year at Temple, not usually it's next year in Jerusalem, but it's next year at Temple. Thank you, everybody.
Michaela, thank you so very much for really teaching us so much more that we need to do. I wonder if you have a couple minutes for some questions.
I would love to
If
answer
we
any
could
questions.
do that, and I guess I want to just ask you a little bit about how in your restaurant business, which since you represented this diversity issue in the Restaurateurs Association, what changes have you noticed in your companies, in the restaurant industry, as you've raised the issue around transgender awareness? Then?
Well, they've made it more of a focus. The James Beard Foundation made it one of their, just before COVID hit, it was a big focus they were starting on. I want to get back with them and see if I can help them with it. The National Restaurant Association, it was the first time their face of diversity was someone who was transgender. I'm not sure about LGBT. And that was interesting in Washington, D.C. It was interesting, speaking to a crowd from all across the country. When I speak to all of you, I'm speaking to the choir. When I go to something at an Out and Equal event or a Trevor event, and I'm speaking to the choir. But that was a little interesting because, there'd be one table that was the Texas table and another table from another part of the country, and I was a little nervous, so I had to make up a few jokes about the Texans and ask them to check their guns at the door. But yeah, yeah, I do see the changes coming, and I think that the interesting thing is, I've gone down and speak in San Diego, and just if we talk about something we're all closer to, and they're more conservative. They had I think a Republican mayor up to recently, and who might run for governor eventually. He wants to, and it's probably part of the recall effort. And it was a huge packed room of restaurateurs that I spoke to, and the welcome I got there was really magnificent, even in some ways better than I got here in LA with the LA Restaurant Association. And for them, it was just, we just want to hire people who want to work. We just want to hire people with a good attitude, and if we can do the right thing at the same time. I was really happy that it was crossing boundaries, at that point. I know the divide, that was like 4 years ago, and the divide since have become even greater. But I think we're going to hopefully get back to where issues like a Trevor, we treat it as a nonpartisan issue. Suicide should not be a partisan issue.
Right.
But we have a ways to go. But yeah, I think we're seeing change.
there's been this recent spate of anti-trans bills in states all across the country. And we saw what happened in Arkansas this week with disallowing medical services to trans youth, and a bill in Alabama. South Dakota staved one off for the time about trans kids in sports. But could you reflect with us a few minutes about this the surge in anti-trans hatred at the legislative level in states across the
So
country?
what you're seeing is the anti-voter bills and the anti-trans bills, right? And hopefully what we're seeing, is a dying breed of ultra conservatives that are lashing out because they've lost control of the federal government. So they're looking at what they can do on a local level. This, people like the Williams Institute that produce the information so it can be looked at and people can make decisions on sound information, not on, bias. And places like the Trevor Institute is doing a lot of advocacy now and going in and fighting these things, the Trevor project. And it's, giving the information is really, trying to get people to see the light is the best you can do. In some cases, it'll stop it. But I think judicially, it's going to go, a lot of stuff will wind up in the Supreme Court with all these. It'll take a while. And I'm not as concerned about Supreme Court as I was, when RBG passed and we just, we lost that extra seat. And because what I'm seeing, the decisions in the court is it's a scholarly court. I think they're focused on the right thing from a perspective of history and the law. And I don't think they're as focused on just, right-wing conservative ideas. And I hope I'm right. That's all I can say. Because that is, for those states that do pass those kind of laws, it's the federal courts that are going to be the only place that it can end it.
Yeah, that's it. Well, we're so honored to have you here. In closing, I want to read this prayer, a blessing, a twilight people, a prayer for trans Jews. As the sun sinks and the colors of the day turns, we offer our blessings for the twilight. For twilight is neither day nor night, but in between. All of us are twilight people. We can never be fully labeled or defined. All of us have many identities and love, many genders and none, and all of us in between roles at the intersection of histories. All of us are crisscrossed paths of memory and destination, streaks of light swirled together. We are neither day nor night. We are both, neither and all. May the sacred in-between of this evening suspend our certainties, soften our judgments, widen our vision. May this in-between light illuminate our way to the God who transcends all categories and definitions. May the in-between people who have come to pray be lifted into this twilight. We cannot always be defined, but we can always say a blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hayotzer et hadimdumim. Blessed are you, Adonai our God, who brings on the twilight. Michaela Mendelsohn, thank you for being with us tonight, and for teaching us and for encouraging us and for pushing us to do the next step and to fight for trans rights and to fight for changing culture. So glad.
Amen,
Thank you so
amen.
much for being with us. And yes, Rabbi Chaikin reminds us, first, Friday night, Mike Prince is going to speak about trans visibility and his journey. And so that'll be this Friday night at services. And on Sunday, a 3-week class is starting called Beyond the Binary, taught by rabbinic student Ariel Zitney and cantorial student Zevi Bierman. They're going to talk about the multiplicity of genders in the Talmud and the Torah and Jewish text as a way for us to continue our learning and growing and fighting for transgender rights. So happy Transgender Day of Visibility. Thank you all for being with us. And Michaela, really, thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Congregation, watch the mail. Congregations Kol Ami is going to do a big donation to TransCan work as a thank you.
Thank you.
We're so grateful.
All right, take care.
Good night, everybody.